Hello and welcome to another video in the IELTS Learning Tips series. Today I'm going to talk about speaking. This video today is a little bit funky, if you like. It's based on a blog post I wrote many years ago, not specifically for IELTS students, but for general English students, but it applies very much to IELTS as well, because the speaking is not about specific techniques. It's about being spontaneous and being fluent in your speaking. And it's also about the ability to do both those things and still maintain a good level of vocabulary and structure and a great deal of flexibility in how you use the language. And that applies to IELTS students. It also applies to general English students who are doing other types of exam. So the ideas are relevant to everybody. And the more fluent and spontaneous you are, and the better your overall level of English, then the better you will score in your speaking exam. For those of you that haven't seen me before, my name's Bernie Wall. I'm an IELTS trainer. I've been working with IELTS students for over 20 years at band 7 and 8, and it's that I specialise in, helping students to get band 7 and 8 in their exam. I was for a short time, well, not for a short time, but for several years, I was an IELTS examiner. So I've had the experience on the other side of the table of what the examiner is looking for in your speaking and also in your writing by looking at the scripts. So the ideas I want to present to you today are really things that you can do on your own. I get a lot of students contacting me saying I don't have any access to other people to speak to practice with. Of course, there are always ways of doing this, especially online, where you can hook up with other people. There are lots of apps, there's Skype, there's Zoom, there's all kinds of places that you can meet people and discuss and talk and practice. So there isn't an excuse if you've got some sort of internet connection. However, I do understand that a lot of people are a bit shy. They're also maybe worried that other people may not be at the same level. They may be much higher. They may also be a bit lower. So all of those things are quite difficult to negotiate, I see. And so there may be a place for ways of practicing English by yourself. Now, I have a Facebook group that I set up about a month ago, and I'm hoping that people who are joining this group will also connect with each other to try and set up partnerships for speaking. The group is Band 7 and 8 Success Network, and I'll give you a link at the end of this video, but there's also a link underneath the video, and you can go along there and ask to join it. The other way of getting closer in contact with me and getting some help from me via any of my training or using my free resources is to sign up to my IELTSlearningtips.com website. And again, there is a link here underneath the video, and also there I've put a slide at the end of this presentation with a link there. So either of those ways will get you into a position where you will be able to find other people. And when I set up groups, and I do, that doesn't necessarily mean I monitor them. These are just groups of students that I know. I will make sure that you meet people who are at the same level as you, so that you can be confident that the speaking buddy will work. Okay, so today I want to talk about some very goofy and funky ways in which you can practice. These are some of them drawn from my own personal learning of languages, because I learned French and German at school. I also speak Indonesian, and I learned some Chinese as well, although that's a little bit rusty. But I use some of these techniques myself, and I've taught, as well as English and IELTS, I've taught French, and I used some of these techniques when I was teaching French. This was in a school, so I used it with some of the students. And so they do work. It is a way of particularly using pronunciation, but I'll put them to you now, and if you can find any of them useful, then please do. They are good things to do if you're on your own, in the car, washing up, making the beds, out in the garden, these kind of jobs where you're on your own and preferably not with people listening in, but things you can try yourself. So let me get the slide up and I'll go through some of them. So I'm just going to share, if I can find the share button, there we go. And we'll just go quickly through them. So practice makes perfect, absolutely, for sure, with every aspect of language. The more you practice, the better it will get, and that is especially certain of your speaking. So the more you get to speak, the more fluent, the more spontaneous. Remember, in the exam, if you make the odd little mistake, it's not a big deal, because what's really important is that you communicate well with the examiner. It is a test of communication. So you have to give your answers in a timely fashion, you have to give sensible, full answers, and you have to make sure that you don't have too much hesitation. So the more you practice, the better that's going to become. So there is a warning I mentioned before. Some of them are a bit goofy. You might want to do it away from other people. So here we are. So find a quiet room, or in your car would be perfect. Singing. So learn some English songs. It's very good for pronunciation, because you have to get your mouth around some of the words. It's also quite enjoyable because, you know, we all like music, and learning songs in English is a good way of getting exposed to vocabulary. Make sure the vocabulary is going to be useful to you if you're going to learn it, because not all song vocabulary is, but it's also a fun way. Okay, this is something that I used to do a lot with students. Present a TV show. You can just use your imagination, grab a wooden spoon, grab a hairbrush to pretend you've got a microphone, pick a topic, and imagine you are a presenter on TV. Now, this is really good for part 2 speaking, because this is what you're doing in part 2 speaking. You're giving a little talk. If you're brave enough, you can video yourself and see how it goes on video, and then listen to it, criticize it, and then try and do it again and make it better. So it's quite a fun thing. You don't have to video yourself. You could just do it while you're in the car. You could do it while you're washing up or doing a job around the house. Okay, poetry. Again, when I was learning French, we had to learn a lot of poetry. And in fact, we have something in English which is like pronunciation, which is called elocution. And when I was at school, especially, it was something that we did a lot, where you were asked to speak very clearly and enunciate all the words well. And it was something that students did practice at secondary school. And one of the ways that this was done, and I'm talking about English now, we did it as English students of English, was to learn poems and recite poetry. And it used to be quite a big thing in schools. I think sadly it's gone now. And it is a pity, because it also trained your memory. But when I was learning French, we did it in French too. And there were competitions where you could enter and you had to recite French poems, and then there would be a winner for the person that had the best pronunciation. Now, I'm not asking you to join in a competition or enter a competition, but learning a poem or a rhyme or something is, again, a good way of practicing your pronunciation, and also of maybe learning some new words and phrases. Okay, so here are some more fun things. This is something I did all the time with my dog when I was learning French. I used to pretend that I was having a conversation with him. The thing is, you've got somebody to interact with, so it makes it a little bit more natural, if you like. Although obviously the dog or cat is not going to respond to you unless you have one of those birds that does. And I don't know, I've never tried that, but that might work. But there are reactions in terms of facial expressions, and it can be quite a good way of pretending to have a conversation with somebody if you don't have a real person to converse with. But I would recommend this. It's not a bad way of doing it. Okay, so it is a bit like a conversation. This is a little bit like the radio TV program. where you become a tour guide. Now, there are several questions in Part 2 speaking where you are asked to suggest a place where people could go and visit in your country. So you have to give ideas about why they should go there, what there is to do there. This is a little bit like being a tour guide. So you could pretend that you're a tour guide in one of the tourist places in your country and explain everything that's there. And it would be a really good way of preparing for Part 2. Okay, so, you know, I've put Part 1, but I actually mean Part 2 here. It's exactly what I said. So you're practicing explaining this place, why it's a good place, what there is to see, etc. Tongue twisters are another way. I don't know if you know tongue twisters. We have quite a lot of them. If you just put it into Google, I'm sure it will bring up some sites where you can find these. Again, they are very good for pronunciation. So they're things like she sells seashells on the seashore. They've got repeated words, or Peter Pepper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Where's the peck of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked? That kind of thing. It's very good for sounds, but it's also very good for rhythm when you're doing language, rhythm and stress. So that's another thing that would help you a lot with pronunciation. And remember, pronunciation is a thing in IELTS. It is in the band descriptors. So if your pronunciation is very clear and it doesn't obscure the understanding of the examiner, you're going to get good points. I mean, it doesn't matter if you have an accent. That's not the point. The point is that the pronunciation should not obscure what you're trying to say. And the more you practice it, obviously the better it's going to be, and then the examiner is going to reward you for that. Okay. Make speeches. This is Part 2. You have to make speeches. Okay, they're not overly formal speeches, but you do have the floor for 2 minutes to make a speech. So my way of doing this is choose a topic, record yourself, listen, criticize, think about how you can improve it, record it again, and do the same. And I've had some students who've recorded them 10 times before they were happy. But each time you do it, it will improve your overall performance in this part of the test. And the more you do it, the better it will become, until when you get into the exam and Part 2 comes to you, you will not have any hesitation and you'll be able to do it quite easily. Practice makes perfect. Okay, so if you do some of these things as you go about your daily life, in your car, washing up, doing your homework, whatever you're doing in your daily life, just try and practice 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it's enough. Obviously, the very best way is to interact with other people. And if you want to interact with other people, then I suggest you either join my Facebook group, where one of my Facebook group members has already put out a message saying, does anybody want to form a speaking group? And the other way is to join my website, sign up to my website for these free resources. There's things on planning, things on writing, things on reading, and I'm about to put some checklists on speaking and listening and other aspects of the IELTS. So sign up there and you'll be able to get all of these free resources. And I hope to see you in the Facebook group. It's a private group, so you just need to ask if you can join, and I'll, of course, welcome you warmly to that group. Okay, so thank you for watching this. I hope some of those ideas were useful. I've used them myself and I can testify to their efficacy, that they do work. So, you know, 5 minutes here and there, every bit counts. Thank you, and please share this video with any of your friends or colleagues who are doing IELTS, and I hope to see you all on the next video. Bye. Thank you.